Hello everyone, and welcome back to my journey through Arcane Season 2. After I have cried every single tear I have left to cry during and after Episode 7, we're back for Episode 8. I did have to take a little bit of a break after Episode 7, and maybe you can relate, maybe not. I just really needed some time to sort of take it in, rewatch it a couple of times, discuss it a little bit with some people, and just kind of really reflect on it and process it and realize what it meant to me and all that it is, because I really, seriously experienced in Episode 7 one of my favorite pieces of media, one of my favorite pieces of entertainment, episodes of anything. And that isn't something to take lightly, so I took some time. But like I said, it really does feel... It's obviously cohesive with the entire plot of the show, so it's not like a side episode or filler or anything like that. But it is a bit of a... It is a little bit isolated compared to the rest of the narrative, so it does leave a lot of work for the last two episodes. There could be a lot of stuff crammed in here. It might not all be satisfying, and I talked about that. And that's okay. That's okay. Like I said, that was lightning in a bottle. If some plot threads had to be sacrificed for that to be conceived, I'm okay with it. And maybe not. Maybe not. We'll see how it goes. Either way, I'm here for Episode 8, and I can't wait to see how this series concludes. Arcane specifically, because I know that there will be more stories for Runeterra? I think that's what it's called. The universe that this story takes place in. Anyways, let's just get right into it. If you want early access for the finale, which is now currently on Patreon if you're watching this on YouTube, you can do so by signing up for early access if you haven't already. Up to you. There's also full length, as always. Let's just get right into it. I do notice that this episode is called Killing as a Cycle, which is bringing forth a lot of the sort of subtextual things we were talking about into the text, I guess. Oh, straight into Black Rose. Straight into Black Rose. Holy shit. What is her role in all this going to be? I'm so interested about exactly what her place in the narrative is. Oh! Beginning of Episode 8,
one of you,
Season 1.
a mage. We each have our own expressions. Yours is quite rare. An empath, able to sense others' inner selves and bend their magic. A conduit and a mirror.
Or, sorry, they were taking the form of the girl in that memory that Ambessa killed.
Your power has merit.
But should one want you dead, a simple blade would do nicely.
So she has the power
Where is my brother?
to intuit the emotions of others.
His
Empathy.
fate wasn't among your mother's lies.
You killed him.
I gave Ambessa every opportunity to atone for her transgressions. She chose pride over progeny.
You want to recruit me?
The Arcane is waking up.
What has my mother done?
The calamity
You know-
is approaching, rivaling even the ancient rune wars. Ambessa sits at the helm, blinded by her thirst for legacy.
Whoa.
Our efforts
Whoa.
to avert her course have foundered.
This is what you see in me? A silver bullet?
I see salvation of your
She
city.
has always been
Countless others
Ambessa's
beyond.
weakness.
She's my mother. For all her faults, she has always done what she thought was best for the family.
She hid you because you are that which she covets most. A weapon.
I don't necessarily agree.
You've been born into a new family,
Not entirely.
from which you'll find there is sadly no return.
This really strikes me like a subplot or a plot line that'll be continued into the next story in this universe that they're going to adapt or whatever.
To your future. The world is a perilous place for a solitary mage. Sister.
That is so incredibly wild. Like, it really strikes me as something that is just beginning rather than finishing up, because it is. I would imagine this isn't something... I imagine this is something that ties over into the next series. Oh, Rictus. Episode 8, wow. Episode 8 starting with Noxus and the Medardas for Season 2 and for Season 1. Vander. It is the direct aftermath. They're still using him, though.
I regret that I couldn't save him.
We do not lament a warrior's death.
Wow. We just...
We
Yes.
avenge
Oh,
him.
that is her entire life. That's the ideology we've been talking about since episode 4. In order to do them honor and justice, she just needs to keep fighting for them and also to protect what she has. But it only exacerbates the original problem that results in her fear. Viktor's alive, though. Viktor's alive. In some form.
Doctor, your ingenuity deserves praise.
Viktor,
I am
grateful. The world I now see
is more lucid than ever.
You can inhabit your followers.
We are one in the glorious evolution.
I sense my twilight approaching.
I sense a team-up
An
approaching.
anomaly festers beneath the hex gates.
This will allow you to evolve others.
In theory, but Jayce's attack has done its work.
I will deliver you to this anomaly if you agree to empower every soldier I bring you.
I will evolve all those willing.
Singed, Ambessa, and Viktor. The Undercity, topside, everything. All that matters is power. For their own respective ends. Oh.
He's dead.
Loris. Oh, that's this guy's name. Okay. Oh.
Dogs to patch you up.
Loris?
Wasn't sure you'd pull through.
He has a bit of an interesting
Where are the
role
others?
for Vi.
Kate? Jinx?
He has an interesting sort of, he's a bit of a conscience
Jinx.
in some ways.
Maybe we can negotiate.
Not with Ambessa. I saw it in her eyes. She will burn Piltover to the ground for my betrayal.
You can't blame yourself.
I don't need consolation. I need a plan.
Arrested?
I can handle this, Maddie.
It's interesting to see Caitlyn's demeanor towards Maddie.
Why? You didn't let me in on that part of your plan.
Clearly the right call, since you still can't trust her enough not to shove her in a box.
Trust?
How long were you sidled up with that shifty, self-serving war pig? She oinked poison in your ear and you just ate it.
I know!
Okay. This is the sort of fallout I really needed after episode 6 between these two.
The only thing Jinx cared about was getting you to safety.
We'll see how it progresses.
Then she just surrendered. I didn't even have time to think before they hauled her off.
Oh.
She's being held in the bunker while I decide what to do.
Kate, she's changed.
We can't erase our mistakes. None of us.
Who decides who gets a second chance?
So Jinx is kind of given up here, it seems like. But she needs to rise up. And I think it'll be due to the help of Echo. Maybe due to the help of Vi. Where's Savika? Savika could help big time with this. It's interesting, Caitlyn talking about we've all got our sins.
If you're here to kill me, make sure to finish the job.
Vi thinks you've changed.
She can't accept what you and I know.
Whoa.
There are no happy endings.
No amount of good deeds can undo our crimes!
Our.
Do what you came here to do.
Hating you? I've hated myself. I just don't have the energy for it any longer.
I didn't know your mom was there. It probably wouldn't have made a difference, but I didn't know.
I like that she says it probably wouldn't have made a difference. If she knew, I don't think in that moment she would have changed her mind, but that's her form there of remorse. This is a good interaction. There's a lot that was unsaid, but implicit between the lines. Oh shit. Oh, wow. She really just...
Jayce?
These two have gone through quite a bit.
What happened to you?
Doesn't matter. You're the reason we didn't die in the attack.
Apparently so. It started then. Feelings I couldn't explain.
Oh, when she okay.
I still don't fully understand.
That's interesting.
How can I know you aren't lying to me?
Why would you think I am?
Because you used me and Viktor for Hextech. You called us investments.
Machine, rallying the hope and hearts of a nation. You were a wise investment.
Holy shit. What the hell is...
Allow us...
What the hell?
Jayce, we must talk.
What?
Viktor.
Had you given me the chance, I would have shown you the merits of my work. Our work.
No. This is your obsession. Everything you've done to these people, you did alone.
Somehow I think you already understand what must transpire to complete my mission. I would prefer to do so in peace. The Noxian has other intentions.
Mother?
Viktor, for all our sakes, stay away from the Hex Gates.
Your mind has become rigid, Jayce. Fear clouds your judgment. The glorious evolution is destined. Let us instead do this once again as partners.
Whoa, what a shot.
My partner died in this
I don't think so. I don't think so, not completely. This is very similar to what Vi would say about Jinx and Powder. The thing, I think there is Viktor. Viktor is still in there, to some extent. Oh, there we go. Oh. Ooh. Kinda looked like a tear.
Doctor, you may begin the process.
It's gotta feel surreal. Oh, look at this. Look at these shots. Him saying that he died in that explosion
Go away.
is very much like Vi saying that
late.
Jinx killed Powder.
It says something about the late Marcus that he found imprisoning your sister to be a greater mercy than killing her. Killing is a cycle, one that started long before Vanda and me, and that will continue long after the two of you. We build our own prisons, bars forged of oaths, codes, commitments, walls of self-doubt and accepted limitation. I thought I could break free by eliminating those I deemed my jailers. But Jinx, I think the cycle only ends when you find the will to walk away.
It's really interesting having Silco saying these things.
Jinx?
Obviously, it's not actually Silco, it's her perception of Silco.
If you come, help use all that explosive
And I like that she
potential of
calls her
yours for
Jinx.
good, maybe we could rewrite your story like you did with Zahn.
You're never gonna give up on me, are you?
Hey! You don't have to worry about me anymore.
You don't need to feel guilty about being happy. You deserve to be with her. There's no good version of me.
What are you gonna do?
She needs someone
Break
else.
the cycle.
Jinx!
Oh my god. She's talking.
This blood is alien to me.
So.
Yet it has dictated the course of my entire life.
So what does family actually mean to you?
I'm no more than a passenger.
She forgoed
a life I spent
family.
in self-pity.
Blood.
Now it's gone. I can never return to it.
There is no force in this world that can control you. You will never be a passenger.
It's true. She hasn't let her blood control her when she thought she was a full Medarda, I guess. She made the decision that her heart pleaded for, not that her blood dictated. So, while it's a shock to her now, it really, in the long run, shouldn't change anything. And holy shit. What the hell?
But we don't have much time. This isn't a fight for ideals or territory. It's a fight for humanity itself. I'm asking, no begging you, every one of you, top side and bottom, to aid us in this coming war.
Huh. Very reminiscent of Marcus.
But it is our only hope. We need every hand we can get. The final bastion of our salvation.
And Jayce completely taking a stand.
If you choose to flee, don't stop running.
Wow.
But I'm choosing to fight. And I pray that you will join me.
Makes sense. Makes sense for Sevika. Though, interestingly enough, she's the one who stated something very similar within the Undercity. It doesn't matter about our petty squabbles, it is us versus them. This is the same thing on a grander scale that she walks away from. So I wonder if she'll come to realize that eventually and come back. She might have been the waitress in episode 7. Oh, and this is very reminiscent of, wow. This is just the beginning of
I might find you here.
the end of episode 4, the beginning of episode 5. Feeling like she's failed Powder / Jinx.
Say it. You told me so.
I was an idiot to trust her. I went behind your back. I choose wrong every time. And because of it, I lost everyone.
You really think I needed all the guards at the Hex Gates? Sorry to say, you've grown a bit predictable.
Wow. Huh. This is interesting timing.
I don't fucking care.
Huh. I don't know. Not sure how I feel about it happening right here. But hey, good for them. Interesting. We'll see. We'll talk about it. I do like how Caitlyn kind of went back and forth between the personas she had in episode 5 when they were going through the brothel. That bit's kind of cute.
You're alive.
Look at that. She is much more than a tool to her.
I know about the Black Rose.
She's ever been her Achilles heel.
Your brother was struck with curiosity. He got caught in their web and with every action grew more deeply entangled.
So you let him die?
Ooh.
I carried him in my belly.
Ooh.
Nursed him from my bosom. He was all the sweetness in my heart. For that, they took him. Carved into me a wound that will never close.
You should have come to me.
Wow.
You'd have made the impossible
Ambessa is one of the greatest
intolerable.
triumphs of this season.
I did what you could not. For you. For the family.
Board your boats. Leave our shores. I will join you. We can avenge Kino together.
This is more than vengeance, child. These mages dangle over our heads a sword that impales us should we rise too high.
Just like the
Their very
Undercity, just like
nature
Zaun.
violates the most core of Noxian principles.
Wow.
That every one of us is equal on the battlefield. That through cunning, sweat, and steel, we shape our destiny.
This is what Silco said in Season 1.
Imagine, child, an army that need never fear death.
Ah, Ambessa. Look at this, man. Oh boy. This is what fear, immense fear and an inability to hope leads to. It leads to this. An inability to accept the negatives of humanity. And even, there's something tragic about even still, even in death, Vander fuels a war.
I guess this is goodbye.
Thank you very much for your company in my solitude, Miss Young. I will miss our talks.
No. You won't.
Whoa. That's haunting. Holy shit.
If I cross the line.
So that was incredibly interesting. A very interesting episode that did a lot of stuff. It had to juggle a lot of stuff, and more or less the sort of thing I was expecting from it. Lots of really cool and interesting stuff and hooks. Some things that I think are not as good. And some things that are a bit like, we'll have to see where it goes. In terms of, we'll have to see where it goes, let's kind of start with those. These are some of the unknowns. One of them is Echo not present at all. Echo is going to stuff everything that he can into the last episode. And that is an interesting choice. In this, and so I guess a combination of no Echo and very little Jinx. All that we hear from Jinx is that she blames herself. She's in the doldrums because of what happened with Isha. And like I said in episode 6, I hope that Jinx is able to realize that Isha made her choice. And the thing that she should take away from this is not that everyone around her dies and that Isha dying is a continuation of the cycle, but more so that Isha broke that cycle by showing her the hope that can be achieved by maintaining your sense of humanity and using your life for a cause. Sometimes sacrifice is necessary in a way that is incredibly heartbreaking, but what happened with Isha was a byproduct of the world, not a byproduct of Jinx. Isha's life was saved by Jinx, and I think that is the sort of complexion she needs to learn about or come to grips with, and she needs to realize that the reason that she lives in this world, her purpose in life is protecting those that are close to her, protecting those that she cares about, protecting the people, the family, and the place that she cares about. And right now, she obviously can't see any of that, and her perception of breaking the cycle is, I think the implication is that she is going to try to kill herself, but something's going to need to stop that. And I imagine it would be Echo. I imagine that he was imbued with hope about Jinx as a person through alternate universe powder and seeing commonalities between them and learning to believe because of the hope he got from that. I think he's going to reflect that back at Jinx somehow. and I think that's going to be huge. But these two incredible characters, both of whom I think will be essential to the way that the series ends, are either not in this episode or hardly in it. And it's an interesting choice, and I guess we'll see the payoff with regards to how I feel about it in the end. Another interesting thing with regards to Jinx is her talk with Silco. Now, of course, that wasn't actually Silco talking to her, it's her perception of Silco, but I think there's no one who knew Silco better in the world, maybe other than Vander. But so her perception of him, I think, is meant to be accurate. I think we can take that as being an accurate perception of who he is. I think the inaccuracy is her misunderstanding his words of breaking the cycle and walking away as her needing to die to just remove herself from this. Whereas I think he's talking much more about walk away from vengeance, walk away from, acknowledge and accept the negatives of humanity, but ultimately do the thing that is unfair and fight for what is right, even if that supersedes your emotions. Walk away from holding on detrimentally for your cause to something that won't really benefit you, something that's momentary gratification, something that's an emotional release. Now, the thing with that is, another thing that I'm a bit torn on, please feel free to share your thoughts, because I just experienced it, I need to think about what I feel about it, but Silco essentially preaching, Jinx's perception of Silco essentially preaching that the cycle needs to be broken, that he restricted himself with his hatred and his vengeance and his need to, his aspirational need to seek freedom in the specific way he did it. Because the thing with that is, there are positives and negatives to both Vander and Silco's rule. Vander brought about a lot of harmony and the closest thing to a comfortable life that I think could happen without revolution. However, that was much less than the people of Zaun deserved, than his daughter deserved, that people like Savika or Silco deserved, and his inability to know of a methodology to carry out his vision of equality for Zaun and bring about a world where Zaunites could live one in one, hand in hand with Piltover. His inability to progress past that status quo that had been established with him and Grayson was his Achilles heel. He wasn't able to properly communicate the complexities of the situation and why he was doing what he was doing to those who had mattered to Vi. He wasn't able to properly tell her the logistics of why he felt unable to progress further, and instead sort of just said vague rhetoric about that is very heartfelt and true in some ways about how hatred doesn't get you anywhere, but he never addressed the core need, and that is a big part of why I think Vi is spiraling. That's what led to Savika defecting. That's what led to Silco, this communication gap, this Vander had a vision, he had no idea how to get to it, whereas Silco had the methodology. He was so passionate and aspirational, and he really did claw his way up, claw Zaun up. Now, it caused a lot of pain for people that sympathized with Echo, who were part of the Firelights, for the negative byproducts that it caused on the Undercity. Shimmer addiction, how it run rampant, the way he disproportionately sort of poured himself into Jinx in a way that didn't really suit the Undercity's needs, that was addressed in episode 8 of season 1, stuff like that. He had lots of faults, and he caused lots of pain, and he was very malicious in times on the way to his ultimate goal. But he had the methodology without kind of losing sight of, I guess, the heart that Vander had in some ways. Which is interesting. I don't think either were perfect, but I do think that Silco kind of admitting there that his hatred and his vengeance and whatever was his Achilles heel, I don't know if I agree with that. Because essentially, he got Zaun to a place in which he brokered a deal with Jayce. He was going to get everything he ever wanted as long as he gave up Jinx. But he didn't, and he said, I never would have done it. I love you so much that everything I worked my life for, that I sacrificed so much for, I gave it up because I would not let them take you. I wouldn't let you become a sacrifice. And maybe that's part of what he's talking about. He says, to know when to walk away, and he walked away from the deal that Jayce offered because it would betray his heart, because he would have to give up Jinx. So maybe that's the epiphany he reached right at the end, that all that he did, none of it was worth it if it meant giving up where his heart truly lied. Maybe that's what we've been talking about with humanity this entire time. It's all about knowing what you value and prioritizing that and not missing the forest for the trees. And in order to properly progress forward, you need to keep a firm eye on what you truly value. Keep a firm eye and not reject humanity. Silco, you could argue that objectively for his plan, his attachment to Jinx was a part of his humanity that was an Achilles heel for his goal. It was something of a flaw with regards to his ultimate goal, but he embraced that. It mattered more to him than anything. And that's sort of a commonality in the theming throughout the season. Viktor is the complete antithesis in rejecting all that humanity is, but the characters who realize their faults, or the rough edges of humanity, or the darkness, or the sadness, or the tragedy, and persist anyway for their goal, they're the ones who will enact true change. And I think Jinx is going to come to that conclusion. I think Echo already came to it in the last episode. It's what Ambessa is unable to do. She cannot move past her hatred and her fear to find the ability to forgive and to see hope in the world. That's why her and Jayce are the two antagonists, the two, I guess, villains and antitheses of this story of season 2. So I guess I've kind of talked myself through and worked it out. I don't really know where to settle on this, but I think there is quite a bit of interesting nuance to Silco saying this, and it doesn't necessarily mean, don't fight for what you believe in, but essentially just understand what you value. Don't let yourself miss the forest for the trees and be caged by your emotions, but let them sort of guide you into understanding what you value and then follow that. That's sort of what I got from that, though, and my initial instinct was to be a bit confused about why Silco was the mouthpiece for breaking the cycle through letting go. But he did do that. He didn't break the cycle. He wasn't able to properly make that extra step for Zahn, because I think he carried himself to a place in which there was an ultimatum like that. Whereas maybe if he had done things differently, he could have had Jinx with him, arm in arm, and he could have fought for the cause with her without having to give her up. Maybe that is his mistake. But yeah, I don't know. It's just a really complex role that Silco has there that I haven't sorted my feelings out on. But I'm warming to it more than I did initially through just talking about it here. Please feel free to share your thoughts on it. And then the last of the things I'm unsure about, or it kind of needs to cook a bit more, is Mel. Essentially, my view on anything that happens in a story, any development, is not about whether it's foreshadowed, whether it comes out of left field, because I think there are no rules about this sort of thing. Sometimes there's left field developments that you never see coming, that come out of nowhere, that are amazing. Sometimes there are heavily foreshadowed things that are amazing. Sometimes there are heavily foreshadowed things that are not good. And sometimes there are things that come out of left field that are not good. There are no rules for this sort of thing. But the way I look at it is, does any given sort of new story development have adequate payoff to justify its inclusion? Does it contribute to the narrative enough for me to buy into it? And what I'm talking about here is Mel. This whole new direction for Mel that was, I guess, lightly foreshadowed right at the end, and through some interesting thematics, because she didn't choose her family, she didn't choose her blood, despite how much she felt like she was guided in her life towards a certain end. When it really mattered, the choice she made was to go with her heart, not what she perceived her blood to be, or her filial duty to be. She went with Jayce and Viktor because that's what she believed in episode 9 of season 1. So it's interesting because in that sense, nothing really changes. And Jayce is right. No one's ever controlled you. You're not a passenger, and that's how she's lived her life. And in that way, it's kind of clever how she has this new revelation that, of course, recontextualizes her entire life, because she now has this connection to the Arcane, this insane intuition and magic, and this power, I guess, that Black Rose wants to wield, as they consider her sister. And knowing more of the story, she now wants to combat them, it seems like. However, the core of her character never really changed through this revelation, in that Mel will do what her heart desires. She will fight for what she believes is right, and she wants to help her mom to that end. However, adding this whole new element of Black Rose, I think the payoff has been clear through what it means for Ambessa. I think it really adds a great amount of nuance and introspection into her character, which I really, really appreciate and I think is great. However, for Mel, it's still cooking for me. I don't know how I feel about it. Like I said, there are some interesting thematic through lines, which I just talked about, that make it fit. I can see some of the vision with it, but what does it really add to her? Does it justify her being really absent for most of the season? And all the stuff with Kino and all this stuff with Black Rose, is that justified for Mel's character? Is the payoff adequate for her to be this daughter on both sides, the sister to Black Rose with these extra powers? And do I view that as definitely better than an alternate universe where she sticks with the role she had in Piltover before and tries to maneuver politically? At the moment, I'm going to be honest, I think I would have, looking at two alternatives, I think I would have preferred her sticking to her role in Season 1. Now, this can change, of course. This can change. Maybe she'll be great in Episode 9. And like I said, I think a big part of this is that this feels like an introduction into some other elements of the universe that we'll see in the future works from this studio and these developers in the other stories aside from Arcane. This strikes me as something of a seed being planted for a story in the future. Maybe Mel will be in that story. Who knows? But at the moment, specifically where I am right now, I just think it would have been better to have Mel in and amongst the politics of Piltover, opposing her mom more directly. I think it would have been cool, and I think that was kind of set up a little bit, and just ultimately being the fox and the wolf that she is, and kind of foiling Ambessa a bit more directly, foiling people like Zavika and Caitlyn a bit more directly. I just think that would have been more compelling to me, and more interesting, and more emotional for Mel's character. At the moment, I feel like she kind of got the short end of the stick a little bit. We'll see where it goes. My mind can be changed, but I just want to be honest and give my thoughts as of right now. Yeah, a lot of this depends on where it goes in the finale and in the future, because I think there's a good chance it could play a part in the future series. But those are my thoughts right now. I feel like Mel deserved a little bit more as of right now. Could change my mind. Let me go from the things that I'm questionable about or not really sure about to a negative for me. And there's basically just one big negative, and I'm pretty sure I know how I feel about this. It's the sex scene, the romance scene with Kate and Vi. I love that. I love both characters, and I love that they had this moment, and I really like I like a lot of little details. Let's start with that. One of them is Caitlyn comes in, and she's being very dominating, very, cool, calm, collected, like when she was flirting and trying to seduce Vi. And that, to me, like I mentioned in the reaction, kind of reminds me of the persona, or whatever, it might not be a persona, but the side of her that she showed in Episode 5 of Season 1, where Vi brought her to the brothel. She was really uncomfortable at first, and then ultimately she found herself adapting like a fish to water with some of the patrons, or some of the people there, as she adopted this cool demeanor. So I think that was a bit of a callback to that, and it's really funny, because after they start kissing, she immediately gets a bit flustered and goes, and hold on, I saw someone, which might have alluded to a couple of different things, but we'll get to that. But regardless, she gets flustered again, which I think shows the other side of her that we saw in the brothel, which was the person who was very nervous and anxious and kind of cutely shy about these sorts of things. So just, I think, a bit of a callback to those sides of Caitlyn that we saw and her relationship with, I guess, intimacy. And both are still there. And I also really like the dialogue and the exchange itself between Vi and Caitlyn, because Vi is so down on herself, immense self-regret, saying she shouldn't have trusted Jinx because she didn't go with her on the plan. She went off on her own, and she's essentially just spiraling more and more and more in this self-perpetuating spiral that's been characteristic of Vi the whole series. And she goes, yeah, just tell me that it was a mistake and I'm stupid for trusting her and all this stuff. And Caitlyn goes, no, it wasn't a mistake. And she validates her. She gives her, she helps through her faith in her feel self-worth, and Vi's immense appreciation of that, I think, is really telling, and then it just whips them into the throes of passion. So I like those elements to it. And it's been something that's been building up for a while, and of course it had to happen, and I'm happy for them. However, just tonally for me, the scene doesn't work. War is brewing, there's a lot of really painful things happening, and yes, that doesn't necessarily mean that two characters can't be intimate. But the tone of the scene, I guess the jokey nature of the start of it, and the music choice really kind of cut through the immersion for me in a way that dispelled a lot of the tension and made me feel like, I don't know, the show didn't realize how serious the stakes actually that it had established were. Because in this moment, all this stuff's happening around them. Like I said, war's brewing, Jayce is amassing an army, Viktor's completely gone off the deep end, Ambessa has completely delved deep into inhuman, non-human combat for the sake of combating her fear. It's just incredibly dark stuff. And then they give us a romantic scene, which could have worked if the tone was different, but it wasn't. It starts off very sort of strangely lighthearted and a bit jokey. And I don't know, I think it was meant to be like, hell yeah, let's go, finally, these girls, they're doing it, finally. But it's hard for me to get into that mode when all the stuff around us happening. Primarily, what I haven't mentioned is that I think Jinx made it very clear that she was suicidal. And I just don't believe that, I think you could maybe argue everything else, and this still would have worked and been in character for these two characters. Caitlyn says, not needing every guard, all that sort of thing. Sure, I think you could argue that. But not the idea of Jinx saying that I'm just, it was very clear what she was going to do. Now, it may have been lost a bit on Vi. Vi didn't really address that directly. She kind of just said, I trusted her, she locked me in here. Now, Caitlyn might have alluded to passing her on the way. I'm not exactly sure. But basically, it's clear that Jinx, at the very least, is in a volatile state. She is either going to harm herself or do something so desperate, despite having an essential role in this war, that she will put herself at great risk. That much is clear. I think that much is established for Vi. And yet she loses herself in Caitlyn here instead of pursuing Jinx. And I don't know. I think it's in character that Vi would... I think the entire scene is in character. But once the door was opened of the cell, I think it is a bit out of character for me for Vi to prioritize in the moment, even emotionally, even impulsively, and losing yourself in passion, this scene with Caitlyn over her sister, who is so clearly in a, at the very least, compromised emotional state and a danger to herself. Vi, to me, isn't the type of person who would not feel a need immediately to go after her. And that's just how I see it. It's too bad that such a big emotional climax is a very flawed scene for me, but that's just how I feel about it. Yeah, it's a bit unfortunate. I just want to take this time to sort of lean into some elements of Vi's characterization in this scene that I think are in character and nuanced and stuff that I didn't really note during the reaction. For the sake of fairness, but then ultimately conclude why it doesn't work for me. I do want to draw attention to the fact that, I talked about some of the psychological mechanisms going on here, the validation, the lack of blame, the self-confidence Caitlyn imbues in Vi by validating her and saying that, no, I trust you and I'm not here to blame you and you are loved, and that sort of thing, and how Vi would obviously react very passionately and happily to that. And that's all very, very important. Vi's been someone who's been spiraling in the same self-detrimental spiral of hatred and self-blame and regret and feelings of powerlessness, and Caitlyn in this moment makes her feel like she's worth something, like she does have authority and control over her own life, and that she's okay. Caitlyn sees in Vi what Vi is not able to see in herself here, and reflects it back to her, and I think it's very natural that Vi would be moved by that in the way that she is. And then there's also an element to this that I think is really important, which is that Vi has been characterized by not wanting to lose the people close to her. She lost her mother and father, very young age. She poured everything into those she cared about. Milo, Clagger, Jinx, Vander. And then she lost 3 out of 4 of those in one fell swoop, and then her pain from that caused her to lose the last person that mattered to her for years and years and years, which then caused that person to turn into something unrecognizable in Jinx, and then she blamed herself for that, for not being able to hold on to that which she cared about. So, in the moment where we see this happen, Jinx tells Vi, basically, I'm gone, I'm going to end this. And I think the implication is very clearly that she's going to, at the very least, do something very dangerous and life-threatening, if not try to kill herself. And I think that's not lost on Vi at all. And Vi laments that and talks about how, as a result of that, she's been foolish to trust Jinx and to put her faith in her and assume that things could be okay. And so in that moment, she probably feels like she's lost Jinx. And she's locked in the cell, so obviously that's been fermenting over time. And then when Caitlyn comes in, the last person who really matters to her, who seems to be, at least in the moment, okay, she doesn't want to lose her either. And so she pours everything into her, and just there's this eruption of passion. And I get that. She doesn't want to lose Caitlyn. She didn't want Caitlyn to change from the person she loved, and all of that. And her life has been constantly this cycle of pain and inaction, or rather a powerlessness in her action, causing negative side effects. And in this moment, she just, more than anything, latches onto Caitlyn and doesn't want to lose her, above all else. And that's great. I think that's very in character and all of that. But I think the thing most in character for me would be Vi trying to ensure that her sister is okay. The moment the cell is opened, I feel like the Vi I know would try to make sure that Jinx is okay, would try to prevent her from harm, because this all sort of adds up to Vi's love for the people close to her, and the desire for them to be okay, and to protect them. So, yes, she wants to latch on to Caitlyn here, and has this very passionate moment, but I think superseding that, the Vi I know would make sure that Jinx is alive and doesn't die. You know? I think it's in character for her to act this way towards Caitlyn in a vacuum. But I think it's out of character for her to prioritize her passion in this moment over her impulse to save Jinx and make sure that she doesn't die. And I don't think that's looking too much into it at all. I think this has been Vi the entire series, and I think that her calling her Jinx as well is an indication of this too. So yeah, it's just essentially out of character that she would prioritize things in this way. And of course, this isn't robotic. Vi is a human being. It's not like she's going, okay, 1 + 1 = 2, let me compute the priorities. Caitlyn greater than Jinx right now. I want to do this. No, it's obviously much less robotic than that, but you get my meaning. And then just even all that aside, the tone of it is so badly done to me. The tone is much more of like, hell yeah, you know? They're finally doing it, let's go, it's hot and heavy and it's awesome. Whereas around all of this, it is this dreary war. Tensions are rising, I'm at risk of multiple characters I love losing their lives, and the tone here is kind of meant to be, you know, sexy and hell yeah. So I'm not saying that a sex scene shouldn't have occurred there at all, but if something like that's happening, it has to be integrative with the characters we know, and integrative with the tone of the episode, the intended tone. I think the music choice was very wrong. I think the music choice should have been much more subdued, and or if they really wanted to lean into the idea that Vi is, you know, kind of self-destructive and unhealthy in her attachment, compensatory attachment to Caitlyn, such that it makes her ignore Jinx, and if they wanted to go that direction, then great. And the music should reflect that by being kind of ominous or dreary, or maybe the music could be sort of sweet, but ultimately having a quick scene afterwards where Vi goes, that was great, but, you know, my sister might be dying, so I gotta go. just altogether, I hope it comes across, there are things within it that work. There are things within it that are in character. But if you zoom out, in the context of the scene within the whole episode, it's tonally bad, and I don't like what it does for Vi in terms of her priorities. There is the argument that can be made that it's a little ambiguous as to whether Vi understood what Jinx actually meant to do. Maybe Vi just didn't even know that she was going to try to die. But regardless, I think all the points outside of Vi prioritizing everything except for the idea that Vi would want to save her life still stands. And regardless, she can tell that Jinx is not doing well and is at the very least going to do something dangerous. And I think my point still stands as a result of that. Even if it's not to the extent of, wow, she is literally, like, suicidal, you know? And also, Caitlyn, I like a lot of exchanges, a lot of things that Caitlyn says in this, because it alludes to a lot of her guilt and her recognition that she went too far. She lost herself in grief. She talks about us when talking about sins that can't be taken away. And she lashes out at Jinx in a way that I think is very human and relatable. And I wouldn't want her to suddenly forgive Jinx because she didn't mean to kill her mom. You know, Jinx, I think Caitlyn is pretty much as close to objectively as you can get, privileged, and is unable to see things from Jinx's perspective, and it can be frustrating because the moment she experiences loss, she completely ignores a big part of the picture, but she's gradually kind of working into it, you can kind of tell, through blaming herself, through at least hearing some element of what Jinx says out, and she's making some strides, and I like that she rejects it. You know, there's elements of self-hatred and self-criticism there, of her not being a fan of what she was doing, but being guided by emotion, being manipulated by Ambessa a decent amount, and all that sort of thing, and her criticizing herself for it. I love all that stuff. I think all that stuff's great. It just, ultimately, I think we've now gotten the payoff for her corruption arc, and like I said with Mel, when I evaluate whether a new development in the story is good or not, you evaluate the payoff, and I think to myself, and I wonder what Caitlyn's corruption really led to. You know, what came from it? Not a ton, really, for me. When, at the end of episode 3, in this horrifyingly, beautifully directed scene, you know, the one where Ambessa kind of sinks her teeth in and starts puppeteering properly, and Caitlyn becomes her figurehead, I imagined that the effects that would have on the narrative would be much more significant than they were. But instead, we kind of get... She does a lot of awful things that she can't take back, of course, and she talks about that, but what weight did that have on the narrative? What weight did that really have on our characters? Of course, it led to some stuff with Vi, it led to some interesting stuff with Jinx, and it led to some great stuff for Ambessa, I think. But really, if I'm comparing it to another pseudo-corruption arc, one of my favorite I've ever seen, in Jayce's in Season 1, Jayce's constant battle within himself, as he got slowly closer and closer to the point of no return, but then came back before he got there, led to so much payoff. So much payoff. The incredibly emotional scene where he expelled Heimerdinger from the council as a result of making an informed decision, but not knowing exactly where he goes with it, and just his incredible emotional torrent inside his mind as he keeps making decisions that he doesn't know if they're right, but he's just got to go with his gut and with his heart, and he's got to think everything through and make a decision. And then his feelings of powerlessness and how that results in him lashing out and doing something which he can't take back, which is killing Rennie's child. And then him and Viktor ultimately realizing that they've gone too far, which leads to, you know, which makes a lot of the developments in Season 2 very tragic. We have Jayce compromising his ideals and missing the forest for the trees, and it leads to the breakdown and deterioration of his relationship with Caitlyn, the stuff I've just mentioned already, and then the slow coming back into his own and to become back and becoming his own person led to an incredibly effective relationship with Mel, and one of the best dynamics in the series, and the immense payoff for him and Viktor. In the search for great, we failed to do good. and how they just about did it. He makes this deal with Silco. He loses himself, but then finds himself. The great dynamic with Silco. Like, there was... I could talk for hours about all the great stuff that came from Jayce's pseudo-corruptive arc. And I would be done pretty quickly when talking about Caitlyn's. I just think when you commit in the way you do in that incredible episode 3 scene, the stuff we get in 4, 5, and then I guess that's about it. I guess some of 6. And then this Fallout, there's some good stuff there. But I think you gotta have the courage to make it have more of an impact on the narrative. How does it really lead to immense payoff between Caitlyn and other characters, you know? Very little is explored there, I think, and I think that's disappointing to me. To talk really quickly about the positives that I was referring to but didn't speak of in specifics, I just think in general, the way that Caitlyn's able to be corrupted by grief and the way it shines a light on her privilege and how easy it is for someone who was honestly something close to a paragon in Season 1 to devolve into these sort of evil acts, I think is great for the layers of her character. It makes her very nuanced, I think the themes of the series shine really well. So yeah, I think just what it adds in a singular context to Caitlyn's character really deepens her, and I appreciate that a lot. I also think that that her dynamic with Ambessa, and specifically what it reveals about Ambessa and her attitude towards family and Mel, and her fear and weakness, and what is divulged through their relationship, is really good too. And that's about it, I think. That's about it. I can't say that there's anything else that results from it that really, I think, is good and made it worth it. And that's where I'm coming from when I say that the narrative was not affected that much by it. I don't think that her and Vi's relationship really, when all is said and done, is deepened much further by her betrayal or corruption or whatever you want to call it. I don't think it changes all that much, to be honest. Really, which is kind of crazy to think about, but I don't think it has a huge impact. Whereas I made the Jayce comparison, and I feel the weight of every decision he makes that slips him further and further into darkness, and I feel so much gratification when he just about saves himself from it to make this grand stand for what he believes in. And I just wanted that for Caitlyn, and I didn't really... because the parallels, I think, are very clear, and it follows a similar structure, but I really didn't feel the payoff and weight and quality that was put into Jayce's arc in Season 1. So I'm just disappointed at that. It's a shame. But hey, it's not like I dislike Caitlyn now. I still think she's a great character. I just think she was another one who deserved a bit more. So yeah, sorry to be negative, but I think this episode represents some of the negatives that have been dwelling kind of coming to a head. And I think Caitlyn deserves better. But that doesn't mean she's not a great character still, and that doesn't mean that her and Vi can't have great stuff in the next episode. Just as of right now, I'm disappointed with her arc. I think it was a bit mishandled. Now, if we're talking about great stuff, I don't have a ton to say about it, because I think I talked a lot about it in the episode 6 discussion, but Viktor and Jayce's dynamic continues to be incredibly good, and the stand that Jayce is taking, once again, incredibly firm in his resolve and conviction, and he knows he needs to do this, and that commitment is striking, especially now that we've considered and seen what he's seen. And Viktor losing sight of Skye as he becomes this new whatever he is, as he transforms into this, is really gutting, really heart-wrenching, and I don't know, it feels like he's kind of reached the point of no return as well. And saying goodbye to Skye, who was really interesting, played a really interesting role in his psyche, in that she encouraged him forward and encouraged him with regards to his ideals and why healing these people was good and in service of the ideals he held all along and benefiting people and innovation and how this sort of progression can lead to good in the world. She was representative of a lot of that, but she also was kind of a confirmation bias that was a connection to his sentiment and soul. She was a kind of reminder to Viktor about where he came from and where his heart kind of lies. Because you're doing all these things, it's kind of getting a little bit out of hand and a little bit unnatural. But no, we're helping people. This is She was kind of his moral center internally. Despite externally there being warning signs and it being really dicey, I think she really kept him on an even keel and reminded him of where he came from. But she is now cut off. She is gone. And he says, "I'll miss you," and she says, "I don't think you will," or something to that effect. And I think that alludes to the fact that Viktor is now cutting himself off from sentiment completely. At the end of episode 6, he alluded to that. And again, really interesting that he only ever really... we only ever see his relationship with Skye after he kills her, sort of in compensation, trying to do things that he imagines she might want him to do because she admired him so. But now there's no pretense, that's all gone, and she calls out his bluff, or his lie. You know, you're not going to miss me. You're not going to have the capacity to. Also, with regarding Jayce's and Viktor's relationship, there was a specific shot of Viktor looking over Jayce on top of his face, their faces facing opposite directions, or their bodies in opposite directions, and his face over top of his. And immediately iconic and stunning to me, but I could not help myself in thinking of a specific shot, one of the most iconic and important panels in Shonen, between Naruto and Sasuke from Naruto. That felt pretty one-to-one to me, and I would honestly be shocked if that wasn't inspired at least partly by Naruto. No connection whatsoever. It's not productive, and I think Skye represented that to him, and I think all that stuff's great, and I think it's leading to probably the thing I look forward to most is how Echo's going to factor into this, and I think save Jinx and what Jinx is going to do, and the way we're going to conclude Viktor and Jayce. And one more thing, actually, which leads me into, again, a huge positive of this season, Ambessa. She's just great in this episode to me. Immediately, you can see, there's talk earlier in the episode about how Ambessa just saw Mel as a tool and never really valued her. No, that was never true. That was never true at all, and you can see it immediately just through the illustrations, or rather the expressions on her face when she sees that Mel's okay. But in their dynamic, she really rules with an iron fist. You know, I would never say that she doesn't love her family or love her child, but she's been born and bred and experienced such hardship that I think the only way she knows how to express that is a way that is fundamentally flawed. You know, Mel says something that hurts her, but because of how much she conflates, I think, in my mind, her desire to save her family with violence, they're one in one with her. She rules with an iron fist for her family. She oppresses others for her family. The reason she does anything she does is for her family, and as a result, due to her fear of losing her family, she just escalates and escalates and escalates and does things that are horrible. She rules a fascist regime. She has an iron grip on these incredible weapons that are used for oppression and just incredibly immoral means. And now she's, without skipping a beat, transitioned to an army of undeads. It's unnatural, it's bizarre, it's strange, and it clearly feels like she's dabbling in things that are beyond her understanding, and that could bite her, who's to say? I wouldn't be surprised if it did, but she just doesn't care because she is someone who will do anything for her cause. There's some great dialogue and some great little moments in her talk with Mel, which may be my favorite scene in the episode. As she hits Mel, you know, again, the two things in her life, family and love and violence, the line between them are so blurred that she acts out in violence, even to her own family, the people who I genuinely believe cares for. I don't buy that just because she expresses her love in a way that I wouldn't or you wouldn't, that she doesn't love them. I don't buy that at all. I think she absolutely does. It's just that she's been raised in a way such that she's so volatile. She's so psychologically volatile, and her fear shackles her so much. Her fear is the shackle that Silco speaks of. And she is unwilling to do what Silco talked about, which is to let go. She sheds a tear as she's talking to Mel about how she does these things, again, for her family, while neglecting to mention that she does it for her family, true, but also because of this gaping hole inside her of fear and powerlessness that she needs to fill by just being more and more powerful to counteract that fear of loss. And there is this line she says, as Mel literally offers to her, I will go with you to enact vengeance for Kino. Let's just leave Piltover, leave them out of the feud, and let's go. Let's go fight Black Rose together. And Ambessa says, these mages dangle over our heads a sword that impales us should we rise too high. And that line is so Silco to me. She also goes on to say that dynamic violates Noxian principles about how we're all equal on the battlefield. It counteracts the principle of Noxus that through cunning, sweat, and steel, we shape our destinies. What did Silco say to Deccan in Season 1? That true power doesn't come to those who are the strongest, or the fastest, or the smartest. It comes to those who will do anything they need to get it. And this is fueled by an aspirational need to be free. What Ambessa wants is to be free of fear. What Silco wanted is to be free, I think, on some level of fear, but essentially just be free in general. To not have... He's just so exhausted of feeling as if there is this noose around his neck all the time, or a roof right above his head such that he can't rise high enough to look at the sky. He is tired of being oppressed. He wants to be free of being a downtrodden person. He wants freedom and equality, maybe more than that due to the compensation, for Zahn. He is exhausted of this sword above his head, of these people constantly lording over him. Ambessa's exhausted of the sword above her head, of the constant threat of her family, of the fear that war will take something from her, so she has to take all for herself. And she clings to the idea that just through might, whether that be through steel, cunning, whatever, the principles that she's learned, steel, cunning, guile, she is held strong to the idea that through those, you can shape your destiny, you can overcome anything, you can be free, and find the freedom you desire. Silco was very much the same, that through any means possible, be free from this. And Silco ultimately leaned on his heart and gave up on the goal that he strived for. Ambessa, if I had to guess, seems to be a prisoner to that fate, to that fear, and is going off the deep end. It has amassed this army of the undead and will not give it up for the sake of her family and her love, and for her daughter, who implores her to do this, and may just destroy herself in the process. So I just think there's a really interesting dynamic between her and Silco. I think they have tons of similarities in the way that they constantly have to strive up, despite them being at different ends of the societal hierarchy here. But the one difference between them here, I think, is that Silco learned that he valued something more and gave up the fight, whereas Ambessa either is too blinded by fear and compensatory vengeance to really see that, or just straight up values this warfare and strength more than her family, which is a sad notion indeed to me. And I think just really plays on the idea that she must have seen so much torment, so much conflict for her to think this way. She never stopped loving, but for her to become warped in this way, such that she could destroy herself for her family without realizing her family is right there. Mel is right there. Leave with her. Fight these civil disputes in Noxus if you need to. And maybe you could die there, but at least you'll be together with your family in a fight that will cause much less destruction, comparatively, I would imagine, and in a fight that you probably have a better chance of surviving at the end of it. But no, she is fighting for the sake of fighting, because that's just all her life has been, and she has no other way of functioning in response to this fear. She said it herself, she cannot find it within herself to hope or forgive or let things go. So in that way, she's an antithesis. In that way, she sees humanity and the flaws of humanity, and she is a victim to it. She's a victim to the violent impulses within her, and her evolution is a bloody one. Not the revolution that I think the show touts, which is one that will be beneficial and progressive and innovative, but one that accepts all that humanity is, strives forward in spite of it, and keeps an eye firmly on the good of humanity and faith in humanity. She has just totally given up and essentially become victim to the darkness of it. So she's an antithesis in that way, whereas Viktor to me is the antithesis through just shedding humanity, avoiding it, which Jayce, I think, thematically directly counteracts him. He is acting purely off of humanity. So yeah, to me, great stuff for Viktor, Jayce, and Ambessa. Amazing stuff. Really powerful stuff for Jinx as well. Lots of good little things for Caitlyn too, but also a crystallization of the fact that I'm just ultimately disappointed with her arc, which could have been a lot more. You know, I didn't need her to be killing children in the streets and stuff like that. I don't need her to be evil, but I did want her corruption arc, and I did predict that she'd come back, right? In a very similar way to Jayce's pseudo-corruption or faux corruption arc. But I did want it to have much more of a positive impact on the narrative, and I don't think that, I think the positive impact it had, which it did, it had some good stuff that resulted from it, but I think it was very minimal, and I think it could have been done in a way that was a bit more efficient. Same thing with Mel, but that's a bit TBD. We talked about that. All in all, a really, really interesting episode, and I can't wait to see how this all concludes. It feels kind of surreal. Hopefully you understand where my criticisms come from. And again, I'd like to say that overall, an episode that is flawed for Arcane is still a great episode by any standard. It's just, Arcane is just so unbelievably good that when there are problems, when there are flaws, they stick out more than they would for the average series, because I just love it that much that I hold it to that high standard. Hopefully you understand where I'm coming from. Feel free to say, to give your take on what I perceive to be the flaws in this episode and the positives in this episode. I hope you can see where I'm coming from, and just of course, if you're expressing disagreement, please keep a keen eye on what it is that I said and not make assumptions or stuff like that, because that can happen when someone criticizes a story you love. It can kind of get blown out of proportion, and words can be put in people's mouths, and we don't want any of that. So just as I'm sure you guys will do, keep it honest. That's all. And like I said, a flawed Arcane episode is still a very good episode. I thoroughly still enjoyed that, despite some disappointment. So yeah, and like I said in episode 7, I kind of anticipated some flaws. And yeah, this is pretty much what I expected. So it's par for the course, and again, I would have traded the world for them giving me episode 7 and some of the great stuff before it as well. And this was good. It was still good. It just was quite flawed. That's it. And I'm still very optimistic about where the season's headed. So we'll see. The payoff to Viktor versus Jayce, what Jinx is going to do, what Vi and Caitlyn are going to do from this point, Ambessa, Mel, there is so much going on here. Singed. I can't wait to see how it all shakes out. And I hope you'll join me for that. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the finale of Arcane. I can't believe it's here. You can check it out early access on Patreon right now if you want to see it right now. But yeah, that aside, I think I'll end it here. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.